Chapter 23 Pyramid. The drive back was as boring as the drive down. I was feeling rather disheartened and was doing my best to ignore Mila's strange behavior. We unpacked the car. Anton and Mila bantered back and forth like normal siblings as I sank deeper into depression. I couldn't help it. I just need to accept the new Mila. There was nothing I could do. Not by myself. I drew the curtains closed on the morning sun, then flopped in my bed. I had closed off the rest of the apartment behind my bedroom door. I couldn't stand the banter. The more I listened, the sadder I got. It wasn't her. And even if it was, I missed a chance to grow up with her because my mother lied to me. My heart ached. My brain didn't know what to think. So instead my emotions took over and filled me with a great sinking depth of pain at my center. Eventually, Anton and Mila left. The apartment rang with an eerie echo of silence. At first I found it peaceful, but that gave way to an incredibly loneliness. I wondered at the deep hole in my heart I had always felt, and if this was indeed the piece that was missing. What are you going to do now? A shadow asked from the corner of the room. I was in so much pain that I didn't even jump in surprise. Go away, Remy, I muttered. So, you still remember my name? I buried my head in my pillow. Are you just going to give up? Yes. My words were muffled by the pillow. And pout. Yes. The bed sank as he sat at the edge of it. You're going to let the darkness have her? I turned on him. What am I supposed to do? I can't fight a mystical evil energy. I'm just one person. I feel silly walking around collecting blood. And my dad isn't even my dad. I don't even know what to think. So, you're not going to seek Matej Popov out?
No.
Aren't you curious? Just go away. Kira. Leave. I threw the pillow at him. He caught it deftly with one hand. After a sad look, he set it down on the bed. Okay. The shadows lightened. I was left alone in the crowded bedroom. I stared at the empty place where Remy had sat. That hole in my heart ached more than before. My eyes drifted up to the stacked cube shelves lining all the walls in the small room. Clothes, decorations, papers, and the rest of my entire life were stuffed in them. Some were in totes, while some items hung out of the shelves haphazardly. The messiness bothered me. The dust bothered me. I just never seemed to have the time to fix the mess. My eyes lifted higher to the small opening in the shelves where I had made space for the window. The pale pink curtain shielded the morning sun. It was all a perfect representation of my life. I had too many unkempt and neglected things. I did not have enough love and attention to go around, so instead they clung onto the shelves and cluttered up my life. My mind wandered to my memories as I looked over each item. I wondered how many times the veil had rewritten them. I wondered if I had ever known my father wasn't my father. Maybe I did at one point, and that was why it wasn't as much of a shock to me as it should have been. I slunk lower into my twin bed. I pulled the comforter up around me, maybe looking for some semblance of a hug. After a time I sank into a restless sleep. My dreams were plagued with memories of my father and my mother. They consisted of mostly fights and heated words. Nothing stuck in my mind, only the anger between them. Slowly my dream drifted into a quest. I ran through a dark jungle towards a pyramid. The battle was gruesome, but I finally reached the top. I stood at the pinnacle holding aloft a giant black sword. I had finally achieved something. I finally felt fulfilled. My eyes fluttered open. A weight sunk near the foot of my bed. I propped myself up on my elbows to see who was sitting there. Golden hazel eyes watched me. I thought I told you to get lost, I said. Remy shrugged. You're cute when you sleep. I tried to fight the blush that came to my cheeks. I lost the battle, so I just fell back down on the pillow and hoped he didn't notice. Where's Ember? I asked. She has things to do. What were you dreaming about? He asked. I squeezed my eyes shut trying to remember. A sword, I think. It was huge and black. I was in a jungle, I think. The knight's sword, Remy whispered. The what? I pulled myself up into a sitting position and leaned against the wall. There was something about that name that resonated with me. Not like déjà vu from a dream, but as if it called to me. Like it was something that was mine that I had once lost and dearly missed. I banished that thought. That was pure insanity. The knight's sword called to you. And what is that supposed to mean? That you have to go get it. Why does this sound like a trick? I crossed my arms over my chest. Fine, don't believe me. I'm just trying to answer your questions. His form began to fade into shadows. No, wait. I'll listen, I begged. His form solidified again. Tell me about this night sword. Remy lifted his finger. The night sword is a legendary sword that was forged to defeat the eternal blackness. It is said. Wait, eternal blackness? Like the darkness? Remy shrugged. I don't know. I am only telling you the legend as I heard it. Are you going to let me finish? He gave me an irritated look. I nodded for him to continue while I ignored his sass. It is said. He waited for me to interrupt again. When I didn't, he continued, that it can call to its wielder's darker half in a time of need to help maintain the balance of the realms. It is unlocked through solving 3 puzzles. I waited to see if he was finished. When he didn't continue, I tried to formulate all the questions running through my mind. Just as I opened my mouth, he held up his hand. Don't. All I know is what I told you. Don't ask me my opinion on it. The sword called to you. Only you can answer those questions. I wrinkled my nose at him. He reached out and booped me on the nose. I blinked and stared at him. Really? I said. He smirked. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. Your freckles are just so cute. I narrowed my eyes at him. I don't have freckles. Yes, you do. Those aren't something you grow out of. You just don't look closely enough anymore to see them. He tapped my cheek. I swatted his hand away. Stop distracting me. Back to this sword. How do I get it? He frowned. Do you really want to go get it? Will it help me defeat the darkness in Mila? I really don't know. Do you think I should at least try? If I can summon the darkness from Mila, then maybe I can kill it with this sword. He shrugged. It's up to you. You don't think this is going to work? I stated. I really can't say. I heaved a sigh, then climbed out of bed and started dressing for an adventure. I put on a pair of work boots, a pair of jeans, one that only had one hole in the knee, a t-shirt and a black hoodie. I didn't have any armor or weapons for an adventure, but I did throw my tote-turned purse over my shoulder. I was as ready as I was ever going to be. All right, take me to this sword, I said. Remy stood from the bed. Are you sure about this? I nodded. I was feeling better about this than about the spell. At least some sort of weapon would be helpful. And there was something about this, a feeling that was drawing me into it. The sword was calling to me. It wasn't just something, it was my thing. I knew it somehow. I knew this sword was a part of me. Remy stood in front of me. His hand settled on my waist. I tried not to concentrate too hard on that. Hold very still, he whispered in my ear. Remy pulled me close to his chest. I exhaled and stilled my body as much as I could. Cold pressed in around me. My vertigo threatened to pull me out of balance. I ended up leaning into him too as the world around me moved. Finally, my feet hit solid ground. His arms loosened. I caught my balance and stepped back. I looked around. We were standing in a dark forest, but it wasn't completely dark. The leaves glowed a teal green, not like the neon yellow of glow-in-the-dark. It was as if the leaves themselves were lit by an outside source, but there was none. It created this fascinating contrast of light and dark in the forest. The tree bark was outlined with a similar brown glow, making the whole forest visible, yet completely shrouded in night. I felt as if this was what a cat saw with their night vision. And all of it felt incredibly familiar. Chirps, screeches, and croaks of various animals filled the air. The loudest of them all was the shake of something that sounded similar to a cicada. Where are we? I asked. I had to raise my voice over the sound of the jungle to be heard. This is a different realm. It has many names, but loosely translated, it means realm of the never-ending night. That seems an apt name for a place to find the night sword. Remy bobbed his head. He only appeared as a dark figure in front of me, so I couldn't read the expression on his face. And where do I go now? Remy's hands came up. He grabbed my shoulders and spun me. There. His deep voice in my ears sent shivers down my spine. My eyes looked through the teal-colored trees and beyond. A giant pyramid rose up above the forest, outlined in its own gold and brown light. Were the Egyptians also from this realm? I asked. A bit of sarcasm dripped into my voice. Pyramids are universal among the realms. Besides, many cultures created pyramids on Earth. That I definitely knew. I was a sucker for ancient aliens. I was into all of that weird stuff. I guess I am going to have to be like Indiana Jones here and find the Arkansas. Remy sighed behind me. I don't think there are going to be snakes. I laughed despite my growing fear. At least there's that. Remy released my shoulders. Let's get this done. Your sister needs you. Right, Mila? It's such a weird feeling having a sister. I never realized it, but we really were like sisters. Even before I knew we actually were. Remy hesitated a moment. He sounded like he was going to say something but didn't. Instead, he started walking through the trees. I followed after him as he cut a path towards the looming pyramid. Chapter 24 Glass. As I followed Remy, the pyramid grew taller in front of us. The weird leaves seemed to part before us as we jogged towards the blocky entrance. Remy's dark figure slipped into the blackness of the rectangular opening. I slipped as my foot hit the first solid surface of brick and down I went on my hands and knees. My tote bag slapped my shoulder and slid down to the floor. Remy turned around and hauled me to my feet, righting me. My vertigo swam for a moment before my eyes adjusted to the new light. Remy laced my fingers with his and started us down the main hallways. There was no light source, but the surfaces seemed to reflect light just like the leaves and the bark in the forest outside. It was the oddest sensation. The walls were covered in pictographs, but they were outlined in multiple colors of light. It was beautiful. They weren't Egyptian style, but they were similar in how they told a story. It was almost as if it was a timeline as we walked down the hall. I saw a sword. Many different people held the sword as we walked. Sometimes it was a person outlined in black light, which was strange to see black light. It was not like the UV purple light that they called black light in the clubs. This was inky dark light, almost like paint, but reflected as light. My physics brain couldn't wrap itself around the concept, and yet here it was right in front of me. We walked further on. The sword switched from person to person. I swung my eyes to the left side. Something similar was happening on the other wall, but the sword was white. I thought that was a little odd. As I looked back and forth, the color of the sword changed, but the person didn't always. Sometimes the black person held the sword on both sides. Sometimes all the people surround the person with the swords were lying down, and sometimes they looked to be busy doing other normal things like talking or waving. Remy stopped in front of me. I tore my eyes away from the murals. In front of us, the hallway opened up into an expansive cavern. A black chasm opened out before us. Below, metal spikes with their own self-reflecting illumination pointed up at us. On the other side of the expanse lay an open rectangular brick doorway. I assumed that was where we needed to go. I looked at Remy. Now what? This is your quest. Not mine. Can't you just teleport us over there? He shook his head. I can't teleport around here. There are no shadows, so to speak. I'm sort of stuck. I frowned. I searched around, but there was no rope. The murals did not extend into this room. All the walls were blank. I knelt down to the ground and felt around. The floor beneath was smooth. There was nothing. I crept forward and felt for the edge of the chasm. Maybe there was something on the edge that we could use to climb over. My fingers slid up to the edge, but not over. Instead, they went straight forward as if the floor went over the pit. For a moment, I could see my fingers instead of just black outlines of them. I think this is glass, I said. I felt around more, watching my self-illuminated fingers. My hand slipped off and I almost tumbled over the edge. Remy grabbed my shoulder as I lurched back. Whoa, never mind. Remy was down next to me, holding my shoulders back away from the chasm. Be careful. I can't save you in here. Noted. I carefully felt again. I really do think it's like glass. I can't see it, but there is a spot here that is clear. For carefully, maybe there is a path across. Oh wait. I reached in my tote bag. I couldn't see my hands or my tote, they didn't self-reflect light like the other things in this realm, but just maybe I could use it and the glass would light it up. I wrapped my hands around a bottle and pulled it out. I hoped it was the right bottle. I pointed the opening at the glass and squeezed. Baby powder shot out and landed on the glass, becoming self-illuminated. Little white specks showed a 1 meter square area of surface ahead of us. I looked to Remy's figure. What do you think? You're the boss. I'm just here for moral support. And balance, I added. Right, that too. I crawled forward. Remy inched in behind me. The glass square seemed to hold. I squirted a tiny bit more baby powder ahead of us. The powder lit up another square piece of glass. I crawled onto that. The next one ahead of us did not light up. I couldn't even see the powder fall. I tried to the left with no luck and then to the right. The next square lit up. I looked behind me at Remy. He was self-illuminated now. His normally stoic face looked concerned. I think it was the first time I had ever seen him worried about something. I focused my eyes back on the next square and crawled across. I went another right and then 2 more forward. The other side was drawing closer, but was still at least another 10 squares away. I tried the powder in each direction but nothing lit up. Remy, I think we have a problem. There's nowhere to go. Did we miss a turn? Maybe there are dead ends. I handed the baby powder to him. He inched back the way we had come and checked. No. You didn't miss anything. I looked around. I held out my hand to him and he dropped the baby powder back. The powder wouldn't reach very far, so I dug out a few other items from my purse. I could actually see all the items now that we were lit up. I pulled out a chapstick, a pen, and USB stick. I chucked each one out another square in each direction. The pen and chapstick were never to be seen again. but the USB stick landed another square in front of me. That's not good, I whispered. I stood very carefully. My vertigo was wavering and it was taking all my focus just to keep from tripping off the side. Remy steadied me from the back. It's okay, you can do this. It's just a little hop, he said in my ear as he massaged my shoulders a little. Right, just a little hop. A 3-foot hop. My insides squeezed tight. And if I miss, I'm done for. Let me go first, Remy said. I shook my head. If you go first then I will have to jump for you. I might pull you off to the side when I flail. It's better if I do this myself. Remy nodded, but his face was grim. I handed my bag to him. Okay, just a hop. I bent my knees. I could feel my vertigo trying to topple me, but I focused hard on the USB stick. I could this. I gritted my teeth and leapt forward. I landed right in the center and didn't topple to the side, but my foot hit the USB and started to slide. I compensated and leaned back as my foot went forward. The USB skittered off the edge ahead of me and disappeared into the darkness, no longer self-lit. I landed squared on my ass. My heart jumped in my throat as I tried not to scramble and flail as my vertigo swam. Are you okay? Remy asked. I blinked my eyes several times trying to orient my vision. Yeah, I'm okay. Just give me a sec. I was doing my best not to cry or to rub my aching ass. I was okay. I was still alive. I could do this. I slowly climbed to my feet. Toss me my bag. Remy swung it. It landed right at my feet. I breathed a sigh of relief. I pulled out the bottle of powder again and checked the left side. I took a step to the left. Remy jumped in behind me, landing gracefully. His lips quirked up on one side in a slight smile before he flattened his expression again. Keep going. Again there were no places to go. I threw another pin out. It landed on the next square to my left. I handed Remy my tote and made the next jump. I landed heavily, but this time I managed to avoid falling on my ass. My vision still swayed, but I was alive. We repeated the same steps. I had to make one more jump into nothingness and we finally made it to the last square. I stepped onto solid ground once again. My heart pounding in my ears lessened as I breathed out deep breaths trying to find my calm. Well, that was nerve-wracking, I said. I couldn't see Remy's expression now that we were no longer lit from the glass, but I assumed he looked as relieved as I felt. Let's just move on to the next one. I don't like it here, he said. As the queen of vertigo, I second that motion. Chapter 25 Mirrors. I crossed the blocky entrance and climbed the stone spiraling steps to the next level of the pyramid. Once we passed the threshold, we came to a dark room lit only by self-illuminated mirrors. There were 13 6-foot-tall mirrors arranged in a circle. I stepped into the center very carefully, looking around me to see if there were any darts or weird traps like in the movies. I breathed out a long breath when nothing came flying out to attack me. Are you sure that's a good idea? Remy asked behind me. I waved my hand at him. Hush. Let me figure this out. In the mirrors I saw the next threshold. I looked around at the rest of the dark room. Remy was walking around the backs of the mirrors. Do you see anything else? I asked. I couldn't see him in the darkness, but his deep voice growled a negative response. So it had to be the mirrors. I stepped forward to the first one to the right. I saw myself. As I looked around at the other mirrors, I saw a few that showed the correct angles for the location, but some showed my back and other my front. My eyebrows furrowed. It looked like light was not reflecting correctly here. My finger reached out and touched the surface of the mirror. My finger squeaked slightly as it connected with the surface. I looked over my shoulder and picked a different mirror, one that had shown my front instead of an angle on my back. Remy came up behind me as I stared at it. Both he and I reflected in the mirror. I looked back over my shoulder. A few of the mirrors were also not showing the correct image. I slid my finger down the front, but this time my finger sunk through the surface like it was water. I pulled it back quickly. The liquid surface solidified again, reflecting my dark form. Did you see that? I whispered. I saw Remy's head nod in the reflection. I stuck my finger through its surface again, then pushed my hand in. Should you be doing that? He asked. I don't think we have much choice. I pushed my shoulder through and then my head. As my head poked to the other side, I saw a group of 5 mirrors around the circle, some of which showed my backside instead of my front. I stepped through the rest of the way. I spun around the circle. The room was similar, but with less mirrors and still no threshold. Remy followed, stepping in behind me. Some of the mirrors showed the right angles of us and a few had a threshold behind us in the image. I touched each of the surfaces of the mirrors. 3 of the 5 were liquid. I chose one and stepped through. The next room held 3 mirrors. I wasn't sure if that was good or bad. I picked another with Remy still on my heel. This one held 7. I picked 3 more. The first room had 3 mirrors, the second 11, and the third held 5 again. Do you know what you are doing? Remy asked. I shook my head. I'm just guessing. Well, I can do that. He disappeared through another mirror. I watched him walk through 3 more through the images in the mirrors. In some, it was like he was right next to me. In one, I was alone. In another, he was alone. I picked a different path. We wound a maze through the paths of mirror. After about 20, I stopped. I watched his image walk through multiple mirrors of the 13 that surrounded me. I wish we could see that path. I murmured. That gave me an idea. I fumbled through my bag and found the keychain flashlight, which wasn't going to be helpful. But the other side was a laser pointer. I pointed it towards a threshold in a mirror. As the light left the flashlight, the red beam became visible. It wasn't just a spot like in our world, instead it was a path of light. Whoa, I whispered. Then louder I asked. Can you see that? Remy's image looked left and right following the red beam in front of him. Yes. Let me follow it. After the first one, he stopped and looked around. It looks like it bounces off the solid mirrors and points to the next one. His image jumped through 6 more mirrors until he stood looking at the next doorway. I'm here. I jumped through the mirror. When I met with the next 7 mirrors, I stopped. There were several thresholds in the images. I didn't know which one my laser pointer would be sending me to. Great. Now how am I going to get there? I said as I pointed the beam around the images. Can't you just point it at the door? Which one? There are 3. I pointed the light at the first one to my right. The laser light disappeared into it, and then bounced as a red light across other images. I turned and pointed the laser straight ahead towards the next mirror. That mirror reflected it to another, and then back to one at my left. Ah! I followed the beam through to the next mirror. I take it, you figured it out? I pointed the beam straight in front of me again from the mirror I was climbing through. This one reflected off of 3 different mirrors before it sank into the mirror on my right. I climbed through that one. Yep. I'll be there soon, just hang on. I jumped through the next mirror and then 3 more. What am I supposed to hang on to? He asked sarcastically while his dark figure leaned against the doorway. I stepped through the last single mirror and into the last room. Well, that was exciting. I couldn't see Remy's face, but he seemed annoyed. I wonder what's next, I said. How come you sound almost chipper about this? He asked. Why shouldn't I? It's physics. Something I'm actually good at. None of this magic mumbo-jumbo shit. I know the rules. I know how to play. Well, I sure don't. Come on, Miss Physics, let's get a move on. He ushered me up the spiral staircase. I couldn't help it. I was actually kind of excited for the last Chapter 26. Lenses. We reached the top floor. I came to a halt as a giant pane of glass blocked most of my path. I stared at it for a minute. Remy let out a sigh and leaned against the hallway wall. I think I see it, I said. See what? He asked. I squinted and leaned closer to the glass. I think I see the sword. It's blurry and really small, but I think that's it. I peered at the dark pointed shape in the center of the glass. I inched around the pane to examine the rest of the room. Large spherical lenses sat on pedestals with wheels. On their sides were tally marks. In the floor coming straight away from the glass was a groove where it looked like the pedestals locked into place. I remembered this from optics class. I knew exactly what to do. I started to push the convex lens that had 3 tally marks on it. What are you doing? Just stay there, I said. Let me know how the images changes when I push this into place. I wish I could make out his expression, but I took his silence as acceptance. I locked the lens into place on the floor. Whoa, it got bigger. And it's upside down. Does it look any clearer? I asked. No. I looked around at the other lenses. There was 5 concave and 10 convex lenses. I walked around to the pane of glass to see how big the sword looked. It still seemed a little small. It should probably fill up the whole pane. I pulled my current lens off of the line and pushed a lens with a single tally mark on it. The image got smaller. The marks are focal points, I murmured. I reached in my tote for a pen and notebook. If I could just set up a lens diagram or do a little bit of math, I could figure this out quickly. When I opened my notebook, the pages were black. My eyebrows furrowed in frustration. This lack of light was incredibly annoying. I dropped the items back in my bag and pushed the biggest number of tallied lens in line. The image remained about the same but sharpened some. It's going to have to be a compound lens, I think. Well, I'm glad that means something to you, Remy said. It means I will need to use several lenses to change the image. I think it needs to be bigger, clearer, and flipped upside down. I looked at the number of tallies on all the lenses. There was probably several ways to solve this puzzle. So, I just needed to pick a lens and then add a few more to it to change it until it was something I wanted. I knew I needed a convex lens to flip it upside down, so I started with one that had a 5 on it. That would give it a -5 focal length. I put that about in the middle. Next I grabbed the 5 focal length convex lens and put it in between the glass and the concave lens right at the focal point. This would move the image to the other side and make the virtual image where I needed it to be. I don't think this is working, Remy said, boredom creeping into his voice. I have to fiddle with it. Just chill out. Now the last lens would be the most important. It was the one that would project the virtual upright image. I picked a smaller lens and put it between the glass and the other concave lens. This would be the tricky part. Tell me when it looks clear. What is that supposed to mean? Just watch it, I snapped. I slowly slid the lens back toward the glass. It's getting bigger. Is it right side up? Like pointy side down?
No.
Well, wait, where'd it go? Alright, we were at the compound focal point. I just need a little bit more. It would be too easy to go too far. I inched it ever so slowly back towards the glass. It's pointing the other way. Is it clear? I don't know. I eased it just a little bit more. Whoa, yeah, it's clear. I saw Remy's figure reach towards the glass. His fingers hit the pane. Wait, what? I thought you knew what you were doing, he said. The image is virtual, I said. I looked up where the image in my head math said it would be. Just keep looking through the glass and tell me when it looks like I'm standing next to it. I left the lens I was standing at and walked to the other end towards the wall. I hesitated each step as I passed the concave lens, waiting for his reply. There. It looks like you are standing right next to it. I stuck my hand in the path of where the line of sight should be. Even though I was half expecting it, I was still surprised when my hand grasped something solid in the darkness. I wrapped my hand around the hilt and pulled. As I pulled it from the line of sight, the sword of night self-illuminated. The inky blackness that was like light outlined its edges. My eyes locked on as I felt a mixture of emotions. I couldn't quite decide what I was feeling. Was it excitement? Fear? Elation? There was something about it that was almost jealousy and greed. This sword was mine. It was a fact. One I couldn't seem to get out of my head. The self-illumination followed down the sword into my arms until I was self-lit. Everything in this world looked crisper. I could even see Remy. He wasn't as bright, but I could see his features as if he was a dim version of himself in this world. But I was no longer a shadow. I was now a part of this strange realm somehow. Kira? Remy asked with a note of concern in his voice. I barely heard him. I was too focused on the sword and my new sense of sight. Kira. I swung on him. He was a lot closer than I realized. I almost sliced him with the sword. I dropped the tip of the blade to the ground. Saudi. Are you okay? I can see you. And your eyes, they look really strange. I tore my eyes from the sword. Like what? Like black. I blinked. Hopefully black eyes wasn't a bad sign. I didn't know a single movie that said they weren't, but this wasn't a movie. What do we do now? Remy pointed towards an open doorway that hadn't been there before. I think we keep climbing. A screech of what sounded like a very large bird came from above, and then another, then multiple at once. I shared a look with Remy. I think that's the final boss, he stated. I gripped the handle of the sword tighter. I had never been in a fight before, but hopefully the sword would take care of that on its own and I would just have to go for the ride. Chapter 27. Escape. I followed Remy up the last spiral staircase to the top of the pyramid, which was actually flat. With my new sense of eyesight, the teal leaves of the trees and night sky above was fantastically beautiful. My eyes locked on 3 dragon, almost flying dinosaur-type creatures. They screeched and circled around the top of the pyramid. Their talons extended towards me as they descended and dived at us. One came right for Remy and I realized he couldn't see it. Duck! I screamed. He dropped and rolled to the side. I think you mean Dino, he said with a huff as he flattened down on the ground. Whatever gets you out of the way. I circled around holding the sword up in front of me. I take it I have to defeat these things? I think that would be a good guess. Any idea how I go about that? Well, I don't know. Maybe trying swinging that huge sword at them. I looked out at the sword in front of me. It had grown to at least 3 times my height. I blinked in surprise. How was I even holding this thing? Shouldn't I be falling over just by the sheer weight? I felt it in my hand, but it felt as light as a feather. What was more, it almost felt as if it was as much a part of me as my arm. One of the flying creatures dove at me with its beak. I swung the sword in both my hands at it. The blade hit it in the neck and dislodged its head in one stroke. I didn't even feel it hesitate while it cut through. The black blood of the dinosaur gushed out, covering me in slick blood. The body continued to fly forward before it crashed on the platform and tumbled down the side of the pyramid. My mouth hung open in awe at what I had just done. That was until the stinky metallic taste of blood dripped into it. I spit to the side, then focused at the other screeching creatures above. Their eyes burned red in fury, probably from their beheaded companion. Now I had done it. Maybe I should have just run away. That would have been more my style. Do you think maybe you can help me? I asked Remy. What exactly you proposed I do? I can't even see them. What if you take the sword? Remy crawled to his feet. I held the hilt out to him as I kept an eye on the sky. I felt him try to pull the sword from me. You have to let go if you want me to try. I am. No, you're not. I looked down. My hands weren't letting go. I was telling them to, and my brain was thinking they were opening, but they weren't. Another of the flying creatures dived towards me. The blade went up and stabbed towards its talons. I'm sorry. I really am trying. Remy rolled down into a crouch out of the way. I think this is a battle you have to fight. My mouth pulled down into a tight frown. This wasn't going to be pretty. I held still with the sword in front of me. The next time one of the creatures dove for me, I slashed at them. We parried back and forth a few times. I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. They circle me. Their red eyes watched as I watched them. I started to see individual scales and outlines of glittering talons. Their bat-like wings flapped, and with each stroke I could see the veins pumping in their leathery skin. They coordinated together this time as they circled above me. They stayed so there was one on each side of me. Then they dove, one at the front and one at the back. Somehow I managed to dodge, and just as they swooped past, I thrust the sword, or maybe the sword thrust itself upwards into the underbelly of one. Black blood rained down, coating me in thick black liquid. I wiped my face with my shoulder, still unable to remove my hands from the sword. The body of the thing shuddered as its guts spilled out and over the side of the pyramid. It screamed in pain as it fell from the sky and tumbled from view, leaving a trail of black blood in its wake. The last leathery beast screeched as it circled me once more. It dove in, talons outstretched. Its sharp claws just grazed my shoulder as I turned, then tipped my blade into the side of its leg. It veered to the side away from my jab. After it swooped around in a circle, it came at me with its beak and claws. I dodged again, or maybe the sword made me. I certainly was not coordinated enough to take the credit for it. The dinosaur landed hard on the platform. Remy still stayed crouched at the corner, unable to participate in this fight. I leveled my sword at the creature, then ran, or maybe was pulled after the sword. The creature pecked at me, but I was flung to the side. The sword continued on with my hand still clasped around it. It plunged deep into the heart of the thing. The head of the creature lifted high in one last screech as it died on the end of my sword. Its body collapsed just as I pulled the sword free and sprang out of the way. Remy stood and joined me as I watched the last of the life leave the pile in front of me. Good job. I couldn't say anything. Other than Mila, I'd never really dealt with death before. All of it had just seemed so easy. I realized that maybe I wasn't the one completely controlling the sword, but I was holding it. I wanted to kill those things. I wanted to survive. That was sort of a new feeling. I had never really wanted to live through anything before. Are you okay? Remy asked. I don't know. One of my hands released from the sword. I looked down at it. The sword itself shrank down to its normal size. My eyes went wide as it shrank even further until it was just the side of a dagger in my hand. Well, that's convenient, Remy said. I nodded. I looked around. The forest was still outlined in its beautiful tones of blues and teal greens. The noises of the jungle rose with their chirps and croaks now that the battle was finished. Any idea of how to get out of here? I asked. I still can't teleport. Maybe the sword can do something. I looked down at the inky black outlined dagger in my hand. I grasped Remy with my other, then held it up in front of us. Take me home, I said to it. In my head I pictured my bedroom and all the stuff hanging out of the shelves. To my surprise, it actually worked. The realm of eternal night melted away. My dimly lit bedroom took its place. Remy looked around quickly. Wow, you actually did it. I looked down at the knife in my hand. I actually did. The night sword was just a simple black knife with a black blade. It looked similar to a hunting knife now. I held it out in front of me like I was slicing the air, hoping it would turn back into something more deadly, but nothing happened. Maybe it only works in that realm. Remy squeezed my hand. I had forgotten I was still holding his. He leaned in close to my ear. You should probably take a shower. He pulled away, taking his hand with him. My face felt all hot, but after one look in the wall mirror I realized he wouldn't be able to tell. I was covered in black goo from head to toe. Yeah, that a good idea. Chapter 28 Dinner. I woke to excited screeches from the front room. I blinked the sleep from my eyes and wondered if it was a parakeet being murdered or my possessed roommate. Mila burst into the room. She seemed almost back to her usual self. Kira, come out. Come meet my dad. He's brought stuff for us. She vanished with a flip of her blonde hair. I rubbed my temples. What the hell was going on? The last thing I remembered was falling into bed around noon after taking a really long shower. I reached under my pillow where I found a black knife. I wondered how that had gotten there. I stuffed it back under the pillow, then dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. I took a deep breath, then prepared for my first encounter with my real father. I crept out of my room and leaned against the hallway wall with my arms crossed. Here he was, the man I should talk to just arrived in my apartment. A nagging feeling pulled at me deep in my gut. Was this somehow Remy's doing? Was he forcing me to follow this trail? I already told him I didn't like this spell idea, but somehow things were just happening to fall into place. Matej stood 6 feet 2 inches in solid muscle. He looked like a bouncer at a club. His head was shaved and his ice blue eyes sparkled with joy as he listened to Mila. She bounced up and down as she spoke just like she would normally, at least before the darkness took her over. I studied his crooked nose and high cheekbones. His coloring was different than mine, but the features were strikingly familiar to my own. Are you going to cook for us, Daddy? Mila asked excitedly. Matej grinned. Of course, Pumpkin. He turned to me. And you must be Kira. It's very nice to finally meet you. Mila's told me so much. I'm Matej. He offered a big hand towards me. I shook it. His grip was firm but not unkind. Nice to meet you, I said. He looked me up and down, but not in a lecherous way. He gave a slight smile, then turned back to Mila's beg for attention. Come on, Pumpkin, you can chop the veggies. They slipped behind the corner to the small kitchen. I caught Anton's eye and he shrugged helplessly. We worked together to clear the table. I sat at the dining table while I watched them work. I felt like the life had been sucked out of me, but at the same time I was curious. He chattered almost as much as she did as they made dinner. Anton set the table while I just watched. The kitchen was small enough and even smaller with the three of them dancing around each other. The apartment somehow felt warmer, happier. I wondered if Mila was really in there and the darkness had taken a step back. She seemed normal for the most part, but every once in a while her head would cock in my direction. Something in her eyes just wasn't right. I banished the thought. I was no match for this craziness. It was probably all in my head anyway. Dinner was served. The table was filled with numerous dishes. I hadn't seen a feast like this in years. We sat in the 4 mismatched chairs around the small round dining table. Kira, Mila tells me you work together. I nodded, then shoved a piece of what I guess was lamb in my mouth. She also tells me you were going to college for a while. I nodded again, chewing my food. Yes, she went for physics, Mila interjected. But you didn't finish? I shrugged and shoved more food in my mouth. She couldn't get approved for more student loans. Ik leerde her. She didn't need to be sharing my business. She blatantly ignored me. I see. Did you at least enjoy your major? I swallowed my food. Yes. That's an interesting subject, physics. What were you going to do with that when you graduated? I shrugged. It was just something I was good at. He gave a knowing nod. I felt like he was holding something back, but he didn't say more. She's just about to turn 21. We were starting her pre-week partying when I got in that car accident. But I'm okay, Mila said. Bits of food threatened to fly out of her mouth as she spoke. Well, I'm glad to hear you are okay. It must have been some night. I couldn't help my scoff. Everyone turned to look at me. Sorry, just some food got stuck, I said quickly. Oh, here. Dad brought wine, let me get it. Yes, bring out the wine. Let's have a toast, Matej said. Mila sprang up and grabbed some mugs. She poured the wine. She handed our one wine glass to her father. Oh, ouch, he exhaled. Blood trickled down his hand. Oh, Daddy, I'm sorry. I thought I would give you our best glass. I didn't realize it was broken. I'm so sorry. She quickly grabbed a towel and covered his hand. It's okay, Pumpkin. It happens. He smiled genuinely at her as he patted her hand. Thank you. He stood and washed his hand in the sink. He left the bloody towel on the counter. My eyes stuck to it like a magnet. Here, I have a Band-Aid, Mila offered. He stuck out his hand while she affixed a pink Hello Kitty Band-Aid to his finger. Is der her? Did that just really happen? He sat again. We finished our meal while Mila chatted on about everything under the sun. Anton piped in occasionally but didn't get the chance to add much. I sat and watched this happy family, all the while considering how easily we had just acquired my probably father's blood, and the fact that Mila, of all people, was the one to acquire it. My eyes searched the shadows. Maybe Remy was behind the scenes pulling the strings here. After dinner, Anton and Mila cleared the dishes. I had never seen them be so clean. The presence of their father had really brought out their manners. Say, Mila, I forgot the ice cream. He handed her a $20 bill. Why don't you hop down to the corner store and get us some? Anton, go with her. Make sure she's safe. Mila bent and kissed her father on the cheek. Right away, Daddy. The dutiful son and daughter bounded out the door, leaving me alone with their father. He stared me down. I held his gaze. You look like your mother. I continued to stare at him. He knew. He knew I was his daughter. I could see it in his eyes. Remorse and guilt were written on his face. I will help you with college. How long? I asked. Pardon. How long have you known that you are my father? He broke his gaze. Just tonight? The whole time. It's complicated. I don't care. You've blown up my whole world. How long have you known? He asked. I ignored him. Why didn't anyone tell me? Does Mila know? Or Anton? Look, Kira. I'm sorry. There are things you need to know. The world is so much bigger than what you see. Now that you're twint. No, I don't need your wisdom. I stood. Or your help. I grabbed my coat off the hook. You and your sister. I stormed out, slamming the door as I went. I didn't need him to step in as a father now after abandoning me my whole life. And Mila, she was my sister. And she was the darkness. He didn't even notice. What a good father. I didn't need someone like that in my life. I already banished one father. I could do it again. Chapter 29 Memory. I trudged out into the sunshine. The afternoon sun lit the street. People passed. Weird things passed. I was still seeing the crazy. Or the unknown. I wasn't sure which side of the fence I was on yet. I walked a long ways trying to get away from it all. I wasn't going to jump off a bridge this time. Wait, I remembered that. My head stung with pain. Why were things so complicated? I just wanted a straightforward answer. I felt like so many things were being kept from me. I walked on. I could go back. Maybe Matei had some answers. Maybe we could work all this out. But no. I was too angry. He knew. He knew the whole time. I didn't need a liar like that in my life right now. Maybe never. I wasn't ready to let him in. I kept seeing shadows under the trees. The little ember blinked in and out of my peripheral vision. I wasn't in the mood. I avoided the shade. I didn't want to talk to that liar either. I knew he'd just smile at me and I would forget all my anger. I took the path down to the river. I sat on the grass away from the shade of the trees. The water was calm but moved along at a rapid pace. I let my mind process the anger, the lies, the crazy. How long are you going to sit out here? Remy's voice drifted in from somewhere behind me. I thought you were allergic to sunlight? I asked. No, just avoidant of it. I threw a pebble in the water, then watched the circular ripples spread out from its sinking point. Why are things so complicated? I asked. Life is complicated. You may not understand the decisions your parents made, but if you were in their position, you may have made the same choices. Were you there watching them the whole time? I threw another pebble. This one went farther. No, not the whole time. Only when I was assigned as your guardian. Even then I have more charges than just you. I just wish I could see what happened back then. I threw another pebble. When it hit the water, it bounced off the surface. My eyebrows drew together. Wah! The water rose. From beneath it, a large serpentine creature rose up like a wave itself. The water rushed off its blue-scaled skin as it towered before me. The sunlight streamed around its edges as I was cast in its shadow. I rose to my feet as the great dragon grew tall before me. I wished for a fleeting moment I had taken that knife with me. I wasn't sure why that would have made much of a difference versus this huge dragon, but it still popped into my mind. Is that your wish? The dragon asked in a deep melodic boom. I. Words caught in my throat. What the hell? I stammered. I am not from hell, little one. I am a creature of the earth. My mouth gaped. My eyes bugged out of my head. I couldn't look away. Remy was by my side, bowing deeply. Forgive us, great one, she did not mean to summon you for such a trivial matter. The dragon's huge golden eyes squinted as he looked down at us. What a waste of power, but I shall grant your wish. It is easy enough. His tail rose from the water and wrapped around us. The tip stopped in front of me. The very tip was a flat diamond about the size of my hand. I stared at it. You need to give him power, Remy whispered. I had no idea what was going on. How did I give him power? What wish was he even granting? I reached out with a flat hand like a high five. The dragon's tail met my hand. I felt a rush of tiredness overtake me, like the life force had been sucked from me. My knees shook before giving out completely. Everything went dark. I woke standing in a bar. Men in leather biker jackets filled the room. The voices in the bar were so loud, I couldn't hear myself think. Then I saw him. I saw Matej. He stood behind the bar serving drinks to some attractive-looking women. His smile to them was pure charm. They ogled him and giggled amongst themselves. He even drew the attention of several men around the bar. People shouted greetings to him as he jumped from customer to customer. The bell on the door clinked as the door opened. The bar grew silent as a dark-haired woman with gray-blue eyes walked through the door. Her dark curly locks framed her face and fell all the way to her waist. I would have known my mother anywhere. She was young. Her belly was rounded, but she moved gracefully. Remy appeared leaning against the wall to her side. He looked different. It was still him, but he was younger. He still wore the same sort of clothes, but his leather jacket looked a little big on him. Remy, I said, but he did not turn my way. Remy, I shouted. No one turned. No one seemed to hear me. My mother walked towards the back room. Matej excused himself and followed her. Remy disappeared. Everyone in the bar stared at the closed door. I shrugged and followed after. My hand went through the doorknob as I tried to open it. I tried again. This time my hand went through the door. I think I finally figured out what was going on. I walked through the closed door. Remy stood against the wall. My mother sat in a chair. Matej stood facing her. Isabel, I can't. I'm sorry. I have Mila now. I'm not expecting you to step up. I just need a little power. I can't do it with just my own. You can at least give me that. You weren't supposed to get pregnant. I don't even know how you did. You're not even my kind. Well, it happened, and if I'm going to survive this birth, then I need power. If I don't, they will sap me and kill me. Matej looked angry. It's not like you can't just have a hookup tonight and get your energy back. Fine. He stepped forward. She held out both hands. His hands met with hers. I freely give you my power, he stated. His face grew pale. Wait, no. Stop. Not that much. Isabel's eyes sparkled. Her face grew more vibrant with life.
No, Matej croaked.
He fell to the floor in a heap. Isabel stood. Thanks, she said simply and walked out the door. Remy followed after. His face that same stony he always gave me. I followed them. I flinched as the door closed and went through me. It was a very strange sensation. Isabel and Remy left through the front door. Two men rushed through the door I stood in and right through me. One knelt down next to him. He had pointed ears and gray scaly skin. Tusks protruded upward from his bottom jaw. I stepped back as I tried to decide if he was a good or bad creature. Brother, come on, wake up. What happened? Matej came to. She took it. Go after her. She took it all, he rasped. The other man ran back out of the room. Shouts and yells followed, then revving of motorcycle engines as the gang followed after Isabel. The remaining man helped Matej to a chair. Betsy, he shouted over his shoulder. A blonde woman walked into the room. Matej needs you. She sat next to him. Matej wrapped an arm around her waist and pulled her to him. He kissed her on the mouth like he was devouring her. She pulled back, confused. What's going on? Matej, the man asked. I can't feed. That bitch sucked me dry. How is that possible? She's not even a succubus, he said. My vision darkened. I lost sight of Matej and the rest of the room. I came to back on the shore of the river with the sunlight warming my skin. I sat up. The river dragon was gone. Remy sat leaning over me, stroking my hair. There she is, he whispered as if reassuring himself. The firefly buzzed around his shoulder. I batted Remy's hand away. You were there. Where? Remy asked. My mom. She stole Matej's power. He's like a succubus or something. Incubus. Inku? Whatever. Fuck. Was that real? Did that actually happen? Remy nodded slightly. What does that make me? Remy just stared at me. God damn it. You're not going to help me, are you? He shook his head. I can't, sorry. So, my father is an incubus and my mother is something that can steal power from them and apparently have children with them, but she's not a succubus. Unless they're all lying. I put my head in my hands. None of this was making sense. I had even more questions now. What are you going to do about Mila? Remy asked quietly. Mila? Mila? How can I even think about Mila right now? What about me? What the hell am I? But Mila is possessed by the darkness. Don't you want to help her? I rubbed my temples. I guess. We somehow happened to get Mate's blood. So I guess you're supposed to tell me what to do next. Remy nodded. He produced a paper from his pocket. You'll need to find a nexus point. Draw this, then bring Mila to it and say the words. His eyes sparkled. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Was it excitement, maybe? I narrowed my eyes at him. This seems too easy. Easy? How is it that everything is just falling into place like this? Remy looked away and shrugged. I guess fate is working in your favor this time. That's never happened to me before. My mind thought through all the circumstances that had to happen to make this go right. The broken car had to work. My mother, who was locked up in a mental hospital, had to give me her blood. My father, my real father, who was actually an incubus, had to give me his blood. All of this, even the sparkle in Remy's eyes, seemed way too convenient. If I was a smarter girl, I would think that someone or something out there was helping me make this happen, because never in my life had anything I wanted ever been this easy. I gritted my teeth and looked down at the paper. At least it looked like I would be getting Mila back after. Chapter 30, Nexus Point. On my walk back to the apartment, I read through the paper. It had a list of ingredients, a drawing of a pentagram with mathematical-looking symbols in it, and, as would be proper for any insane black magic spell, a chant to go along with it. However, to my surprise, it was in English. The first task was to find a nexus point. Scratch that. The first task was to figure out what the hell a nexus point was. It was still before sunset, so I took a detour to the local library. It was small but still open. I nodded to the librarian at the desk as I walked past the entrance. There weren't many people around, or other people either. I did see one with pink skin, but she looked fairly normal. I hope she didn't catch me staring. I sat at one of the computer desks. It had a flat-screen monitor, one of those all-in-one PCs, a small mouse and keyboard. Once upon a time I too had a computer, but not recently. I had to pawn it to pay rent a few months ago. I logged in under my library username. The search screen sat empty as I debated what to type in. Black magic nexus points? Creepy possessed friend removal spell? Local insane asylums? I finally gave up and typed, nexus point. The results were pretty lame. I found a jewelry dealer, some credit card company, and the definition of nexus. After a bit of reading, I learned two things. The nexus is the center or focal point, and from a less than reliable site, the nexus is where destiny and fate collide. I was less than impressed. I typed in Earth nexus points, which led to ley lines, and that is where I fell down the rabbit hole. Mostly it was a bunch of pictures and hokum. I was finding very little evidence with scientific proof. My logical brain was rallying so hard against this. I was finding it hard to take any of it seriously. At one point, even the browser crashed. I think even my computer was getting flabbergasted. I wasn't really finding what I needed. I wasn't anywhere close to a total nexus point or whatever. All of this was just pure guessing anyways. I was just assuming where all the lines crossed was where a nexus point would be. Also, none of the maps seemed to be quite the same. One would have sections crossed over one city, and then in another that crossing would be 6 hours away. I did my best to find a fairly reputable looking site, then just found where some lines crossed closest to me. It looked like there was a spot that had 3 lines in a park nearby. How very convenient. That weird creepy feeling rose again. I mean, it wasn't perfect and maybe I was way off, but a park that close near me with 3 lines? This just all seemed too easy. I logged off and went for a walk. I thought I would check out this spot before I gathered up the weird ingredients. The park was on the other side of the city, well, larger town. When I reached it, the sun was just about to set. I loved the longer days. It was only 9 p.m. yet the sky was still bright enough for me to see into the trees. As I walked, the trees closed in. I checked the GPS on my phone. The flip phone version of this app was in black and white, but at least it showed my current coordinates. The deeper I went, the denser the trees got until I felt completely isolated from the rest of the world. I couldn't even hear the road noise from the nearby freeway. The GPS said I was only steps away. The trees were so thick I had to crawl between 2 very large tree trunks in order to continue on. I stumbled into a clearing. My breath caught in my throat. This was weird. I spun around. 6 large oak trees with trunks the size of cars stood around me. They towered high above with their leaves blotting out most of the light in the sky. The roots of the trees rose from the soil like small mountains, creating a barrier between this circular clearing and the rest of the forest. My chest thrummed. It felt weird. Maybe it was all in my head, but I was definitely creeped out. I fished the paper out of my pocket. With a stick I drew the star-like shape in the dirt. I lined up each point of the 6-point star with a tree. It helped keep the star balanced. I started in on the symbols. I knew this one was lambda. In physics, it was considered wavelength. I drew a few more symbols that I didn't recognize, then came across another symbol. This one was delta, meaning change in, that I worked my way around the circle. When I was finished I could work out just a little bit of what this was doing, or at least if I applied physics to it. I did find this all very fascinating. I wish I could talk to someone that actually knew what this all meant. Yet, in the back of my mind this all seemed way too familiar to me, like I'd done this before somehow. Remy. The word whispered off my lips before I knew what I was saying. It was funny how that seemed to be my go-to name whenever I was stuck. But who else did I have? The shadows to my left darkened. Remy stepped out. Ember buzzed around his head almost like an annoying gnat. He tilted his head as if in a nod and the firefly slowed and drifted. You rang? He asked. Are you always just standing around watching me, or do you teleport to me when you hear your name? Is that really the question you want to ask? I shook my head. I want to know what the symbols mean. He shrugged. I'm not really up to snuff on the witchy stuff. I cocked an eyebrow at him. Witchy stuff. He pointed around the circle. It's just a bunch of grappling to me. What do you think it means? The firefly dive-bombed his head. He leaned to the side to avoid it. What's wrong with her? I asked. He waved Ember away. Beats me. When she calmed down I continued. I think it's calling up energy, transforming it, and transferring it. Well, doesn't that make sense? I bowed my head in thought. My fingers went to my bottom lip and pinched it. I guess if the darkness is energy, it could be calling it forth, changing it, and pushing it outward. But this symbol here. I pointed to the capital Phi. What is it doing with flux? Maybe the symbols here don't mean the same as they did in your physics classes, he said as he took a few steps closer to me. I could feel the heat from his body and that smoky campfire smell. I looked around the circle but I couldn't seem to think clearly. I was too distracted. Maybe you're right. He smiled down at me. His gorgeous golden eyes drew me in. It looks like you've got the whole circle done. What's next on the list? I flattened out the paper underneath the light of my phone. A bunch of ingredients. It says pine needles, marshmallows, chocolate, graham crackers. What is this? A campfire? Do you know what is going on with this? Remy set a hand on my shoulder. Why do you ask so many questions? Is the why really that important? Don't you want to do whatever it takes to save your friend? He squeezed my shoulder gently as he answered my questions with 3 more. I mean, yes, I do want to save her. I just feel like if I knew what I was doing, I could do a better job of it. I looked up into his gold-rimmed eyes again. I can trust you, right? He stared down at me with a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. It was only for a moment, then it was gone. He tilted his chin down towards my ear. Why wouldn't you trust me? He whispered. His hot breath tickled my ear. Hot shivers ran down my spine, steaming up my insides. My mind spun away from any thoughts about the spell, and to more pressing concerns. My body was hot. It wanted him and so did I. The memory of his lips on my neck flooded back in. His soft lips were just inches away from my neck again. I leaned in ever so slightly. I wanted to say something witty in his ear, but words failed me. I couldn't think straight. His ashy scent filled my being. I wanted to touch him. Kira? He asked, jolting me out of my trance. Yes. I stepped back and busied myself with folding the paper in my hand. Did you have any more questions for me? I shook my head quickly. Nope, that's it. Okay. I have to go check on my other charges. You stay out of trouble. He gave me a wink and vanished in the shadows. I just stared at the spot for a while as twilight turned the sky darker. I blinked. What was I doing again? I felt so foggy. Right. I had to get to the store and get these things. Then I had to figure out how to get Mila out here. I felt a little more energized now. I was going to get my friend back. Chapter 31 Store. I kept my steps lively as I marched down the street towards the store. I only needed a few things. I jammed my hand in my tote bag and fished around for my wallet. I had $20 and some change. That should be enough for some campfire food. I ducked into grocer outlet. I knew I shouldn't be here, but it was the cheapest place to get food. I darted around the aisle to avoid eye contact with my manger. If I was careful, I could get out of here without getting seen by anyone that would rat on me. I sunk in low as I waited for the manger to pass. What are you doing? Angie asked. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I knocked several cans of beans from the shelves as I danced around in an awkward spin to avoid stepping on them, and to get a better look at the intruder trying to blow my cover. Shut up, I breathed. I'm trying to be covert here. His stony face stared at me. What are you doing? He repeated. Why do you care? I whispered harshly. I'm not in any danger, so piss off. I have stuff to do and you're drawing attention to me. He crossed his arms and grew taller. A lady with mouse ears walked by pushing a cart in front of her. She paused, looking Angie up and down. She turned to me and winked, then continued her shopping. My face went pale. Oh my God, just leave. And put some pants on. Your armor skirt is making people look. Angie frowned. He looked down at his breastplate, cuffs, and skirt. But they're shiny. I rolled my eyes. I linked my arm through his and tried to pull him further down the aisle away from my whistling boss. Why are you running from him? Angie asked as he followed along my tug at his arm. I just don't want to talk to him, okay? He's a creep, I whispered. Angie looked back behind him at Mr. Klein. Yes. I stopped. What? What did you just do? I tried to peek around Angie's huge form to see if the manager was still standing. I just read his aura. It's very black. That could mean anything. He could just be unhappy about his job. I continued down the aisle away from Mr. Klein. You said he gives you the creeps. I waved him off. Stop trying to help me. Why are you even here? I can't say. I stopped in front of the marshmallows and grabbed one up under my arm. Is that an official line? Yes, but it's also true. I huffed as I walked to the candy aisle where I picked up some chocolate. Look, everything is fine. I'm going to get Mila back. That's all. So, can you just go? You're drawing too much attention to me. Two teenagers with pointed teeth giggled as Angie and I walked past. They whispered conspiratorially as I turned the corner. Angie growled. I spun on him. What's that supposed to mean? I can't say. I smacked him on the chest. It was really solid. Like so solid it made a thunk noise when I hit it. I smacked it again for good measure, then I couldn't seem to pry my hand off his chest. I stared at it for a few seconds. It looked so small against his broad chest. Angie's hand closed over mine as he gently pried it off him. I tore my eyes away to look in his bright blue ones. Don't go messing around with things you don't understand. That's what happened last time. Last time. The words fell from my lips just as he vanished in front of me. What did he mean by last time? I haven't meddled in stuff I didn't know about. I never did that. I always had some sort of plan for everything. I prided myself on knowing all the details for executing the plan. I continued on to the crackers section. Last time. A faint memory, maybe that of a dream, whispered through my mind. I was in a forest filled with pink roses. Or something. The scrap of memory faded as I stood in front of the cracker section. I grabbed up a box of graham crackers, then headed to the front counter. Angie's warning left my mind as I concentrated on the paper again. Campfire items, check. Pine needles, check. Creepy node point, check. Now I just needed to figure out how to get Mila in the forest. I looked out the windows into the night sky. The store would be closing soon. I grabbed up a flashlight from the checkout stand as I made my purchases, then shoved all of it in my tote bag and headed out the door. Kira, Mr. Klein said. I turned to see him leaning against the outside of the customer service counter. I internally swore, but externally I plastered on my fake smile. Manager. Fancy seeing you here on your day off. I nodded. Yes, sir. I was just picking up a few items on my way home. Looks like you're having a fire tonight. You have all the items for Esmores. I sure do like those, they are my favorite. Yeah, well, they're for a friend. He just asked me to pick them up on my way over. I see. Going to see your boyfriend, perhaps. My plastic smile couldn't get any tighter. Yep, that's it. I slowly started edging towards the door. Well, that's new. You'll need to bring him by sometime. I want to make sure I get a good look at him so he can have my stamp of approval. Yeah, okay. Sounds good. I felt my plastic smile turning into a frown. Okay, gotta go. He's waiting, you know. Well, you have a nice evening. I'll see you in the morning. Don't stay out too late. He called as the door swung and I escaped the incredibly awkward conversation. That was one of the many reasons I never wanted to get stuck talking to him. Why did he need to know if I was dating anyone? And why did he need to give his stamp of approval? Who the fuck did he think he was? Angie had more authority in the matter than he did, and I'd only met him twice. As if I needed approval anyways. The more I walked, the more I thought, and the more heated my thoughts got. I was piping mad by the time I reached my front door. I didn't even notice the nighttime darkness I had just walked through to get home. I stared at the stairs to my front door. I took a deep breath. I could do this. All I had to do was get Mila out there. Chapter 32. Ice cream. I pushed the door open. To my surprise, Matej was still there. Mila and Anton sat with him at the table eating straight from the tub of ice cream. I gritted my teeth and smiled warmly. There you are. Mila jumped to her feet. We waited a long time for you. She rushed over waving a spoon in my face. You have to try this. We found butterscotch. My eyebrows rose. Butterscotch ice cream was impossible to find on the shelf. I'd only ever made it at home. It was definitely my favorite. I couldn't help myself and accepted the spoon. I joined them at the table. Matej and I shared a glance. I slapped the spoon on my tongue and narrowed my eyes at him. Where did you go? Mila asked. I pulled the spoon from my mouth. I got a phone call, then had to go pick up something. Mila waited for more information, but when I didn't offer it, she turned to Matej. How long are you visiting for, Daddy? He shook his head. Not long, pumpkin. I just had some business to take care of and thought I would stop by while I was in town. I have to head over to the bar in a little bit.
Mila se lip pouted.
That's too bad. Both Matej's and Anton's heads turned slightly to her. Even I felt what she had said was out of character. She should be crying, begging or something, but again the darkness just made her feel weird. She smiled at them. I'm so excited you got to visit and make us dinner, she said excitedly, drawing her attention away from her previous reaction. She bounced up to her feet again, then wrapped her arms around his shoulders. Matej stood and held her in a bear hug, seeming to forget the awkwardness. All right, little munchkin, I have to go. He offered an arm out to Anton and wrapped in him a hug too. He looked at me and nodded. I glared. He gave me a sad look. It was nice to meet you, Kira. He pried Mila off of him and then left out the door with a few more hugs and much more goodbying. When the door finally closed, the mood dropped to depressing. It felt like the life had been sucked out of me. Both Anton and Mila looked similar. I wondered if that had anything to do with the incubus nature of Matej, or if it was only sex that regenerated him. For that matter, did Anton, Mila, and I all have the same nature? Did we feed off others' energy too? Did I? My thoughts were derailed as Mila sighed and plopped heavily in the dining chair. The chair creaked and wobbled but did not collapse. It was such a Mila thing to do. I hesitated. Maybe it really was her. Then she tilted her head, reminding me again, the darkness had her. I guess now was as good a time as any. I was ready for this whole business to be done with. Hey Mila, why don't we go for a walk? I suggested. Her eyes lifted to mine. I would normally expect to see some joy like an excited puppy dog, but instead I saw dark cunning in her eyes. Did the darkness know what was about to happen? Was this a trap? I pushed my worries aside. What choice did I have? I had to save my friend, right? Where are we going? She asked, her voice sounding actually excited. But again, it wasn't in its usually way. It's pretty late. It's a surprise. Let me just get a few things together first. Go dress warmly. She nodded and scurried off. I went to the kitchen and picked up the discarded bloody towel, then to my bedroom and found my long-sleeve shirt with my mother's blood on the sleeve. I grabbed the vial of father's blood too, just in case. I retrieved the black knife from under my pillow and slipped it into my bag too. I had no idea where it had come from, but I caught myself looking at it a little too long. It snapped out of it, then dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans. Mila popped out of the bathroom just as I dumped the items into my tote bag. Ready? I asked. Of course. I love surprises. She bounced up and down on her feet. She followed me to the front room where she donned a jacket and a pack. What's in the bag? I asked. What's in your bag? She countered. It's a surprise. Then me too. I quirked an eyebrow at her, but decided not to fight. I just wanted to get this business done and over with. I wanted my friend back already. I led her down the stairs of our apartment complex and to the sidewalk. We walked while Mila talked about nothing. Something about puppies, I think. I was so focused on remembering the words on the paper, I didn't hear a thing she was saying. After a time we made it to the park. The night was dark. I used the flashlight to light our path. Mila produced one too. We entered the trees as I led Mila deeper into the park. I felt like I was leading her somewhere to get murdered. A cold shiver ran up my spine. Maybe I was. Mila was oddly silent as she followed behind me. The trail closed in. The trees thickened until I found the clearing. The 6 tall thick oak trees stood ominously. The circle I had drawn still lay untouched. I stopped at the edge of the circle. Mila stopped behind me. Are we going to play a game? Mila asked. I swung around. I felt like I was being baited by the darkness. Yes. Close your eyes, I said and took her hands.
Mila obeyed.
I led her into the center of the circle. Sit here. Again she obeyed, sitting cross-legged at the very center. I put my phone on the ground and earbuds in her ears. Listen to this song, then come find me. Ooh, hide and seek. My favorite. She cooed. She unstrapped the backpack and set it on the ground next to her. I gave it a glance but decided against moving it. Hopefully it wouldn't mess up the spell. I placed the bloodied items on the points of the star, and the campfire items on the other points. I sprinkled pine needles all over the circle, then took the knife from my pack and cut the bottom of my hand open. My bloodied hand held the paper. It trembled as I read it. I was still surprised the words were in English. I was expecting Latin or some hard-to-pronounce gibberish. I seek the power of Azarok, demon of the darkness. Bring to me my other half, my blood, my soul, my sister in the womb. I offer you the blood to seek my desire. I offer you the power of this soul. The words seemed very straightforward and simple. I didn't know how all this mumbo-jumbo worked, but if it was supposed to be straightforward, that wasn't exactly how I would have put it. The blood from my hand dripped on the bottom point of the star. Mila's body went rigid. Her mouth lifted to the sky in a terrible scream that raised goosebumps to my skin. The circle and symbols within glowed in eerie green. The forest dimmed under the starlight. The night descended like a cloud, blotting out everything but the circle and Mila's horrible form sitting frozen at the center. The scream pierced my ears, alerting my flight center that I needed to run for my life and piss my pants all at once. As much as I wanted to, I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot even though everything in my body was flinching in utter horror of what I was watching. A wispy gold cloud drew out of Mila's scream, like the sound itself was producing it. The black cloud of darkness dropped from the sky at the center and enveloped the gold wisp, then sunk lower to envelope Mila's body. Something didn't feel right. I tried to scream. I tried to move. I think I had just made a mistake. The darkness billowed outward, masking all light from the circle. My vertigo took over. I swayed but couldn't move to catch my balance. I felt like I was falling even though I wasn't moving. My stomach took over, swirling with nausea. It was more than I could handle, and I dry heaved in the utter blackness. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the cloud was suffocating me. It felt cold and lifeless. The black swirl on my arm burned to life at its touch, pulsing in inky black. It seared my arm with ice as pain danced up my arm. It was too much. I tried to scream. I tried to say anything. The only thing I could think of was the one person I could almost possibly trust. Remy. 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 I couldn't say it. No sound would come out. Only Mila's dying scream could be heard. The words died on my lips, but my lips kept saying it. Remy, Remy, Remy.